The twin suns have hung low in the silver sky, casting long shadows across the crystal towers of the royal capital. The palace stood like a living mountain of blue stone, glowing from within as if it held a heart of light. Inside those ancient halls, Princess walked alone, her steps soft against the polished floor. Servants bowed when she passed, but she hardly noticed. Her chest felt heavy, as if each breath carried a new burden. Everyone in the kingdom believed she would soon announce her future, an honored warrior of her world, someone powerful and noble. But none of them knew the truth. None of them knew about the human. His name was... They had met months ago after a failed peace mission near the border of hostile space. His ship had crashed on the outskirts of... She remembered finding him, wounded but standing tall, trying to protect two injured crew members even when he could barely walk. She had never seen such stubborn courage. And when he spoke, simple words filled with gentle strength, something inside her shifted. Now that quiet human occupied a place in her heart that no royal decree could erase. Paused at a balcony overlooking the city. The breeze lifted her silver hair as she rested her hands on the railing. Every tower, every street, every glowing lantern carried the weight of tradition. Her people expected perfection from her. They expected obedience. They expected her to think only of the throne, but never asked her to be a princess. He simply saw her. As she stood there thinking of him, footsteps echoed behind her. A familiar voice followed, sharp and controlled. "Your Highness, the council is preparing the hall. They anticipate your announcement." It was the captain of the royal guard, loyal, disciplined, and one of the possible candidates named for her bonding ceremony. He looked at her with eyes trained to hide emotion, but she sensed the tension behind them. "You still have not told them your decision," he said quietly. "The court grows impatient." Looked away, "I know." "You must select a partner approved by the council," continued. "The people rely on tradition. Any other path will bring disorder." She turned to him slowly, her voice gentle but firm. "I will not lie to them." His jaw tightened. "Then you intend to choose the human." It wasn't a question, it was a blade laid bare. Children played in the streets far below, their laughter rising faintly through the open air. That sound reminded her why her choice mattered. A future determined by fear would poison the generations to come. "Saved my life when that rebel ship attacked," she whispered. "He stood in front of the flames without thinking. He is not of our world, but he understands honor, kindness, and sacrifice. These are the qualities a ruler should value." Looked pained but held his posture. "The council will never allow this. They will see your choice as weakness." "Or they will learn," she replied softly. Before he could answer, a horn sounded across the palace, deep, echoing, ancient. It was the call of assembly. The court had gathered. Took one last breath of the cool air, then began walking toward the hall. Followed behind her in silence, though she could feel the weight of his unspoken doubts. The grand doors opened with a low rumble. Inside, the circular chamber glowed with violet light. Rows of nobles stood in shimmering robes, their faces sharp with expectation. Crystal pillars lined the hall like guardians of history. The High Chancellor stepped forward and bowed. "Princess," he announced, "the royal court awaits your decision regarding your sacred bond. Tradition demands clarity." Whispers rippled through the hall. Walked to the center of the room. The platform beneath her feet pulsed with soft blue light, sensing her presence. Her heart thumped against her ribs, but her voice remained steady. "I have made my choice." The hall quieted instantly. Her mother, the queen, watched with unreadable eyes. Some nobles leaned forward, others prepared their disapproval like weapons. Lifted her chin, "I choose." But her words cut off when she sensed something. A shift in the air, a presence she knew too well. He stood near the entrance, guarded by two soldiers, his clothes simple, his posture respectful. He should not have been allowed inside the sacred hall, yet somehow he was there, looking at her with the same determined softness she had fallen for. She felt everything inside her settle into certainty. And she knew part two would begin with a storm. Silence spread through the royal hall like a cold wind. Every noble, guard, and advisor stopped breathing for a moment. The human, stood by the entrance with quiet eyes and dusty boots, completely out of place in a room carved from crystal and ancient power. His presence alone felt like a spark tossed into dry grass. Princess felt her heartbeat jump, not from fear, but from a fierce kind of courage rising within her. She took a step forward, her silver robe brushing softly against the glowing floor. The murmurs began instantly. How did a human enter this sacred place? This is an offense. He must be removed. Does she defy tradition? Lowered his gaze as if he didn't belong there, but saw his hands, steady, not shaking. He wasn't a warrior like her people. He wasn't trained for royal courts, but he had walked inside anyway, knowing the danger. That alone filled her chest with warmth. The High Chancellor struck his staff against the ground, sending a wave of light through the chamber. "Princess," he said, voice strict and cutting, "you were about to name your chosen. Tradition demands a partner of blood. The human's presence is irrelevant. Continue." Her mother, the queen, sat on her throne of shifting blue crystal. Though she said nothing, her eyes held the pressure of centuries, calm, heavy, impossible to read. Inhaled slowly. Each memory of rushed through her mind, his tired smile when she found him injured in the forest, the way he talked about Earth's sunsets, the way he apologized for bleeding on her ceremonial cloak even though he had nearly died saving her. These memories were not weakness. They were reminders of who she truly was. She spoke clearly, "I choose the human." Gasps erupted. A few nobles stepped back as if she had declared war. Others stared at her with wide eyes, stunned and disbelieving. The Chancellor's voice cracked for the first time in her life. "You choose him, a non, a visitor from a world that barely knows the stars." "Yes," she said, "is my choice." Looked up sharply, shock flashing across his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but a guard placed an armored hand on his shoulder, warning him to stay silent. A tall noblewoman stepped forward, her robe swirling like molten gold. "Princess, you insult our ancestors. Your bond is supposed to strengthen the crown. How can a human, fragile, short-lived, without our gifts, stand beside a future queen?" Met her gaze without blinking. "Strength is not measured in height or power, stood between me and death when our enemies attacked. He protected my people without being asked. His courage does not come from tradition. It comes from his heart." Another noble pointed toward. "Humans act from emotion, not duty. How can you trust him with the throne's legacy?" "Because he never hides who he is," answered softly. "And because I choose a partner who sees me as more than my crown." A voice rose from behind her, the one she had expected yet dreaded. It was. He stepped forward in full armor, the blue plates glowing with an inner fire. His expression was a mix of pain and loyalty. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "you are forcing the court into chaos. You know the law. A ruler must choose someone of descent. You ask the impossible." "I ask for change," she said. "And change demands sacrifice," replied. Before she could respond, finally broke his silence. His voice was soft but carried through the hall. "Princess, if my presence causes trouble, I can leave. Your future matters more than anything." His eyes held no resentment, only concern. Those words hurt her more than any noble's insult. She whispered, "No, I won't let fear decide." The Chancellor raised his staff again, the crystals flaring with harsh light. "Princess, one last chance. Choose a partner or face removal from your position. The law is clear." His breathing quickened. He didn't know their laws, but he understood the danger now. Stood still, her hands trembled not from doubt, but from the weight of the moment. When she looked at, everything inside her steadied. "I will not take back my choice," she declared. "Whatever the consequence, I stand with him." The hall burst into chaos. Angry shouts, fearful whispers, guards stepping forward, advisors clutching their robes. The crystal pillars flickered with unstable light, reacting to the tension. But above all the noise, the queen finally rose. Her voice, ancient and commanding, cut through the storm with a single sentence. "Bring the human forward." Everyone froze, swallowed hard as the guards guided him toward the center where stood, toward a future no one had imagined. And in that frozen moment, the destiny of two worlds began to shift. Steps echoed softly against the crystal floor as he walked toward Princess. Each footfall felt like it carried the weight of two worlds. The nobles parted silently, their eyes wide with disbelief and curiosity. He wasn't royalty. He wasn't trained in courtly ways. He didn't know the laws or the customs. Yet somehow he moved with a quiet dignity that made even the most critical eyes pause. Watched him, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and pride. This was it, the moment where her choice would either fracture her world or reshape it forever. She extended her hand, not as a princess demanding obedience, but as someone inviting a partner. His eyes flicked to her hand, then to her eyes, searching for permission. When she nodded, he took it, and the contact sparked a warmth that seemed to ripple through the entire hall. The court murmured, some gasped, others whispered sharply. The High Chancellor's fingers tightened around his staff, his face pale. "The human touches the royal bloodline," he hissed. "This is unprecedented." His voice rang out, steady and commanding. "He stands beside me not because of blood, but because of courage, heart, and loyalty. If tradition cannot understand that, then tradition must learn." A noble elder with robes of deep indigo stepped forward, leaning on a staff carved with intricate runes. "Princess, you are young. You do not understand the consequences. By choosing him, you risk the stability of your throne. Your people will doubt your judgment, your allies may turn against you, and your enemies will strike when we are divided." His hand tightened around hers as if he could absorb her fear and shield her from it. "Princess," he said quietly, "I do not claim to know your ways nor your laws, but I swear I will stand with you. Whatever comes, we face it together." The room fell still again. The nobility had never seen such raw honesty from an outsider. In a court where words were carefully measured, practiced, and polished to control minds, simple promise carried a weight no decree could match. Then a sudden roar shook the hall. The palace alarms blared, echoing like the cry of 1,000 spirits. Crystals lining the walls flashed red. Smoke drifted from the corners of the chamber. Someone from the balcony shouted, "Invaders at the southern gate! They've breached the outer defenses!" Panic erupted instantly. Guards ran, nobles clutched each other, and the High Chancellor's staff glowed violently, trying to contain the chaos. Eyes scanned the room, taking in fear, uncertainty, and hesitation. Her hand never left. "Princess," shouted over the alarm, "this is the perfect moment for your enemies to strike. You cannot afford weakness." His voice cut through the noise. "Weakness or courage?" She released his hand for a moment and raised both hands, calling on the palace's defensive energy. Blue beams of protective light flared from the walls, forming shields that pulsed with her command. For a heartbeat, the court could see the raw power she held, not as a princess bound by law, but as a leader guided by choice. Stepped forward into the defense circle beside her, instinctively blocking a fallen crystal shard that flew through the air. Felt a rush of pride. Even without knowing their technology or customs, he instinctively acted to protect others. He didn't hesitate. He didn't question. He just acted. The invaders, shadowy figures, were visible now at the far gate, armed and relentless. Yet in the hall, time slowed. Every eye turned toward the human and the princess who chose him. No one dared speak. Every noble felt the weight of what was happening, not just a battle outside, but a battle for the heart of itself. His voice rang clear once more. "He is my choice, and I will not step back. We face this together, me, him, and all who believe in courage over tradition." Caught her gaze and nodded, a silent promise passing between them. The bond had begun, not the ceremonial bond the court expected, but something far stronger. Trust forged in danger, in courage, and in love. A ripple of realization spread through the nobles. The human wasn't a liability. He was a symbol. He was proof that bravery and honor were not confined to bloodlines. And for the first time, some of the council began to question their own rigid beliefs. Outside, the invaders were advancing, but within the hall, a new force had emerged. The undeniable power of choice, of heart, and of humanity standing shoulder to shoulder with royalty. Took's hand again. Together they turned toward the approaching threat. Their eyes met briefly, a silent agreement. No matter the outcome, neither would back down. And in that moment, the future shifted on the courage of one human and the resolve of a princess who refused to be bound by the past. The palace shook under the roar of the invaders' engines. Shadows of monstrous ships stretched across the violet sky, reflecting in the crystal towers of. Inside, the royal hall became a storm of light and sound. Guards rushed to positions, crystal pillars flared with defensive energy, and nobles cowered behind the protective barriers. Princess stood in the center, her hand still gripping. She had never felt fear like this, not for herself, but for the people who relied on her. Their lives depended on her courage, and in that moment she realized something crucial. Leadership was not about rules. It was about heart, and had heart in abundance. "Stay behind me," she shouted, though her voice trembled only slightly. Didn't move. He matched her step for step, scanning the hall with sharp, intelligent eyes. Even without training in alien combat, he instinctively calculated threats and paths, protecting the nobles around him. The invaders' first wave smashed into the outer shields. Sparks flew, alarms shrieked, and crystal debris rained down the hall. One of the pillars cracked, and a section of the balcony collapsed. A servant screamed, frozen in fear. Without hesitation, lunged forward, catching the falling figure before they hit the ground. His breath caught. Even in chaos, he moved with precision and care. "Princess," yelled, "your people must be evacuated. The hall cannot hold." "No," shouted back. "We face them here together." The invaders breached the gates and poured into the courtyard. Their shapes were terrifying, armored, alien, and ruthless. But even as fear tried to take root in the hearts of the nobles, they saw something impossible: the human and the princess standing side by side, unafraid. That image alone inspired a courage they hadn't felt in decades. Spotted a squad of invaders approaching from a corridor that led into the hall. Without hesitation, he grabbed a fallen energy staff from a guard and held it tightly. He had no training, but instinct guided him. He swung, knocking one invader off balance, then another. Eyes widened. Each movement was precise, confident, and protective. She felt a swell of pride. The human she had chosen was proving himself in the harshest test, not through noble birth, not through tradition, but through action, heart, and courage. The High Chancellor stepped forward, his staff raised, ready to command magical defenses. "Princess, this is madness. Stand aside." "I will not," replied. She unleashed a pulse of energy from the floor, sending a wave of protective force toward the invaders. Crystals around the hall vibrated, glowing brighter than ever. Yet even with her magic, the invaders pushed forward. Saw one of the nobles trapped under debris, screaming for help. Without thinking, he lifted the rubble with sheer strength, freeing them before the magic could reach. His breath caught again. It wasn't his powers, it was his will, his determination to protect, no matter the odds. Watched silently, conflicted. He had always been loyal, always believed in tradition, yet he couldn't ignore the bond forming before his eyes. A human, an outsider, was standing tall when the greatest danger had seen in decades approached, and the princess had chosen him. The invaders surged closer and realized she needed to act decisively. She said, her voice calm despite the chaos, "Behind me, watch my movements." He nodded. Without hesitation, he mirrored her stance. As raised her hands, casting waves of energy to repel the attackers, used every tool at hand, crystals, fallen pillars, even his own body, to shield civilians and nobles alike. The court began to see the impossible. This human, untrained and foreign, was as vital as any royal guard. Time stretched. Each second felt endless. And yet, amid the chaos, noticed something even more profound. Fear no longer ruled the hall. Courage did. Not because of tradition, not because of lineage, but because of a human standing beside the princess. A massive invader crashed through the main door, roaring, prepared to strike but moved first. He leaped, pushing a noble out of the path, taking the brunt of the force himself. Pain shot through him, but he rose immediately, eyes fixed on her. "Are you all right?" called, her voice tight with worry. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a small smile. "Now let's finish this." The court saw it then. This bond, forged in choice, courage, and loyalty, was stronger than any law, stronger than fear. And as the invaders advanced, realized that their destiny, hers, and perhaps all of had changed forever. And in that hall of crystal, amidst the chaos and fear, a human became the symbol of hope. The royal hall trembled under the relentless assault. Sparks flew from cracked crystal pillars and the air shimmered with unstable energy. The invaders were relentless, their armor reflecting the violet light of the palace. Yet amidst the chaos, Princess and moved together as one, a human and a princess, side by side, defying everything the court had ever known. His breaths came in steady, controlled bursts, though sweat streaked his dusty face. Each movement he made was deliberate, calculated not with skill but with instinct. He blocked falling debris, pulled nobles from danger, and even shielded when a shard of crystal exploded nearby. The court could no longer deny it. He was more than an outsider. He was their protector. His hands glowed with raw energy, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Waves of light swept across the hall, pushing back the invaders, yet she knew her power alone could not hold them forever. She needed, not because she doubted herself, but because his courage complemented hers, forming a force stronger than magic or tradition. One of the invaders broke through a side entrance, a massive, armored figure wielding a jagged energy blade. It charged at the princess. His pulse quickened, but before she could strike, stepped forward, placing himself in the path. The blade hit him squarely in the shoulder. Pain exploded across his body, but he didn't falter. He grabbed the invader's arm, twisting it with every ounce of strength he had, sending the creature crashing into a fallen pillar. Gasps and whispers rippled through the hall. The nobles had never seen such resilience from anyone, let alone a human. His chest swelled with pride and a fierce protectiveness. "Are you hurt?" she called. "I'm fine," he gritted out, forcing a smile. "Keep fighting." Her heart ached, not from fear, but from the admiration and love she felt. This human, so fragile in appearance yet so unbreakable in spirit, stood beside her while everyone else wavered. The High Chancellor, his face pale, stepped forward, staff trembling. "Princess, your choice, it defies every law, every tradition. And yet, you see the truth I have been blind to." "What truth?" she asked, her eyes never leaving as he steadied himself for the next attack. "That courage, loyalty, and honor are not inherited. They are chosen, and you have chosen wisely," he admitted, almost in a whisper. Even who had followed tradition without question for decades watched silently, his expression unreadable. Yet something in his eyes had changed. He could see it, the undeniable bond forming before them, stronger than any law. Suddenly, the invaders unleashed a new wave, hurling energy spears through the hall. Instinctively raised a barrier, but it wavered under the force. Seeing the danger, dashed forward, catching a falling crystal and using it to shield a group of nobles. The court began to murmur, this time not in doubt, but in awe. A young noble child, clutching her mother's robe, stared wide-eyed at. "He's protecting us," she whispered. "Yes," said softly, brushing her hair back, "because he chose to care." The invaders, realizing the hall's defenders were united, faltered, and in that brief hesitation saw an opportunity. She raised her hands high, channeling all her energy into a concentrated beam of light, moved with her, reinforcing her strike by holding a fallen crystal as a focus. The combined force surged forward, sweeping the invaders back, throwing them from the hall and sealing the gates with a wave of glowing energy. Silence followed, heavy and almost sacred. The court, shaken and awed, looked around at the aftermath, the shattered pillars, the scorched floors, and most importantly, at the human who had stood in the center of it all, unyielding and alive. Dropped to her knees beside him. "You." "I told you," he said with a weak grin. "We face this together." The hall erupted into whispers, many of them in disbelief, some in admiration. The queen herself, seated on her throne, finally stood. Her gaze softened as she looked at her daughter and the human. "You have shown the court something it has forgotten for centuries. True courage is not in blood, but in action," she said, voice steady yet filled with emotion. Exhausted and bruised, looked at, she helped him to his feet, their hands intertwined. The nobles who had opposed them now bowed their heads in silent respect. For the first time in centuries, the royal court saw not a princess bound by tradition, but a leader who chose love, loyalty, and courage over law. And they saw a human who was no longer an outsider. He was a hero. And in that moment, realized that choosing was not just about her heart. It was about the future of her people, the proof that courage and humanity could shape a kingdom. The royal hall still hummed with tension. Smoke curled from shattered crystal pillars, and the violet light flickered as if hesitant to witness the aftermath. Nobles whispered among themselves, glancing at the princess and the human who had centuries of tradition. Many faces showed doubt, some disbelief, and a few rare ones reflected awe. But no one could deny what had stood beside Princess, unyielding, courageous, and alive. The High Chancellor cleared his throat, his voice shaking slightly. Princess, the law, our customs, they cannot easily accept what has just occurred. Stepped forward, her robes swaying as she moved, her silver hair catching the soft glow of the hall. Her eyes met every noble's gaze with calm determination. The law exists to protect the people, she said, voice strong. But what protects the people more than courage? What guides them more than loyalty? A leader must see beyond tradition and recognize what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. Gasps and whispers filled the chamber. Some nobles pressed their lips tightly, unwilling to admit approval, while others looked at one another, realizing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Approached slowly, his armor scratched from the fight. For a long moment he said nothing, studying with quiet scrutiny. Then he finally spoke. Princess, I questioned your choice. I feared it would bring ruin. He bowed slightly. But now I see that he stands not just for you, but for every soul in this hall. I respect him. Blinked, unsure how to respond. He had expected resistance, maybe ridicule, but not acceptance from someone as steadfast as. The queen rose from her throne, the crystals shifting beneath her weight. Her gaze swept the hall before settling on and, You have proven something rare, my daughter, she said. You have chosen not just love, but courage. And you have shown our people that strength is not inherited, it is earned and chosen. I will not deny the bond you have forged, for it has already saved lives today. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the most conservative nobles felt the shift. The rules they had worshipped suddenly seemed small against the proof of bravery standing before them. Turned to, gently taking his hand. They may question you, she said softly, but I will not. You are my choice, and nothing will change that. Smiled faintly, still bruised but steady. I didn't expect to be chosen, he admitted. I just wanted to help. You helped more than anyone could imagine, said. You taught them what it means to fight for others, to protect without fear. A young noble, barely 16, stepped forward hesitantly. Princess, human, I saw what you did. I want to learn to be brave like that, she whispered. Others nodded, slowly gaining courage from his example. His heart swelled. This was more than love. This was change, the spark of something new in a kingdom long bound by rigid rules. The human at her side was no longer an outsider. He had become the symbol of hope, proving that courage and loyalty transcend worlds, species, and laws. The High Chancellor sighed, lowering his staff. Perhaps the kingdom needs more than tradition. Perhaps it needs a heart strong enough to make difficult choices, even when the path is unclear. Even the Queen's stern gaze softened. Let today be remembered not as a break from tradition, but as the moment our people learned what true leadership can be. Looked around at the nobles, the guards, and the servants. He had come to this alien world as a visitor, unarmed and uncertain, and now he stood at the center of its future. His chest swelled with a mix of awe and humility. Squeezed his hand gently. Are you ready? She asked. Our world will not be easy, but we face it together. I'm ready, he said firmly, meeting her eyes. With you. The court watched, some still hesitant, others quietly inspired. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in gold and silver. The palace had survived the attack, but more importantly, it had survived the fear of change. For the first time in centuries, people witnessed a bond not chosen for blood, title, or tradition, but for heart. And as and stood together in the glowing hall, something unspoken passed between them, a promise that their courage would guide not just their lives, but the fate of an entire kingdom. The human had become more than a visitor. He had become a hero, a partner, and a symbol that even the most ancient rules could bow to courage, loyalty, and love. And the kingdom would never forget it. The morning sun rose over, its twin rays glinting against the crystal towers and casting golden streaks across the palace. The air was crisp, filled with a quiet sense of hope. The battle from the previous day had ended, but the echoes of courage and choice lingered like a new song across the city. Inside the royal hall, Princess and stood at the center, holding hands. The court had gathered again, not in judgment this time, but in respect. The nobles' robes were immaculate despite the chaos of the previous day, yet their eyes were softer, their expressions more open. Some bowed subtly, acknowledging the courage that had come not from tradition, but from heart. The queen stepped forward, her presence commanding yet gentle. "Princess," she said, her voice steady, "yesterday you faced danger, chaos, and doubt. You made a choice that challenged centuries of tradition. And yet, your choice was true, wise, and just. A kingdom survives not on rules alone, but on the courage of those who lead it." Inclined her head, her silver hair falling over her shoulder. "Mother, I did not choose lightly. I knew it would be difficult, that the court might resist. But I could not ignore my heart, nor the bravery I saw in a human who risked everything for us." Stood beside her, his hands still bruised from the fight, his clothes dusty but his eyes bright. He looked at with unwavering loyalty. "I did what I could," he said softly, "but it was her courage that gave me the strength to stand." A ripple of whispers spread through the court. Some nobles nodded slowly, others struggled to hide the awe in their eyes. The High Chancellor, usually strict and unyielding, stepped forward. Perhaps I have been blind," he admitted. "The courage we saw yesterday proves that leadership is not only inherited, it is chosen, earned, and inspired by those willing to risk everything for what is right." Who had once doubted his decision bowed deeply too. "You have proven that true courage knows no boundaries," he said. "Not blood, not species, not tradition. It is measured by action and heart. I respect you for it." Felt a warmth he had never experienced. In his world, humans often measured worth by accomplishments, but here, in an alien kingdom, he realized that courage transcended worlds. He glanced at, who smiled faintly, her eyes shining with pride and love. Outside the palace, the citizens began to gather. Word of the princess's choice had spread quickly. People of all ages and stations paused to look at the palace, many whispering stories of the human who had stood beside the princess. Some were skeptical, some amazed, but all could see that something had changed. An invisible barrier had been broken. Courage, loyalty, and love had proven stronger than fear or tradition. Turned to the court, raising her hands slightly. "From this day forward, let our kingdom remember that strength comes not only from blood, but from choice. Let us honor those who act with courage, who protect others, who fight for what is right, even when it is hard. This is the world we will build together." A moment of silence followed, then applause began, soft at first, hesitant, and then growing louder, filling the hall with sound. Even the most stubborn nobles joined, their claps echoing across the crystal walls. Squeezed's hand gently. "You led them with your heart," he said, "and they followed." "I did not lead alone," she replied. "I had you by my side. You taught them and me what it truly means to be brave." They stepped together onto the balcony, overlooking the city that shimmered beneath the morning sun. Children waved from the streets, guards saluted, and citizens cheered from below. It was a simple, beautiful moment, but its meaning was profound. A human and a princess standing together had changed not only the heart of a court, but the spirit of an entire kingdom. The queen watched them silently, a small, proud smile on her face. "You have given our people hope," she said quietly to herself, "and perhaps a new way of seeing the universe." Rested her head slightly against a shoulder. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "we face it together." Wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "Together," he agreed. Above the palace, the twin suns rose fully, bathing the city in light. It was not just the dawn of a new day. It was the dawn of a new era, one where courage, loyalty, and love could overcome fear, tradition, and doubt. A human had become a symbol, not of an outsider, but of hope. And a princess had shown that the strength of a heart could change the fate of a kingdom. And so began to believe, not in laws alone, but in the power of choice, courage, and humanity.